Alright guys, hi there, welcome back to video 2 in our drafting series. We're going to practice now drawing a wall on here, and the wall that we're going to draw is going to be the wall that we're going to actually model later on, and that's this wall right here. Okay, so we want to draw this particular wall. In order to do that, we're going to need all of our supplies, which is our ruler, our drawing paper, which is the right size. It has to be the same size that I'm using, which is described in video 1. This is going to also require that we have some kind of piece of paper or a brush to wipe away our eraser marks, and a pencil, preferably with a white eraser. Before we start drawing, I need to cover with you guys some basic concepts of what it is we're drawing and what size it's going to be. In building, we typically build things with what's called stud length, and we build walls, I should say, with stud length. And the reason we do that, grab my pencil, and let's just grab another piece of paper here and look at that real quick. The reason we do that is because a typical 4 by 8 foot sheet of plywood, 4 foot by 8 foot sheet of plywood, or a 4 by 8 foot sheet of drywall is a standard building size or unit that we use in the United States. It's a very common size in other places as well, unless you're building in places like Japan where they might size things by tatamis or something. So when we take a look at this 4 by 8 sheet, we want to fit everything in and around this particular size. You don't want to have to cut a bunch of pieces or have a bunch of waste and create a bunch of extra work and wasted materials. So let's take a look at the wall. The typical wall size when we build is going to be made with a bottom plate, which we've talked about now, and it is going to be made with a top plate and a double top plate, and the area in between them is going to have studs, right? So, and that's what makes up our walls, are these studs. So we typically have a wall, a skeletal structure, with a bottom plate, vertical studs, a top plate, and a double top plate. And all of these things combined are going to create a certain size. Hopefully one that works around that 4 by 8 sheet that we were just talking about. So first of all, when you look at stud length, if you Google right now and you stop your video and you Google what is stud length, go ahead and do that. I'll wait for you. Really, pause the video. All right, so hopefully you did that and you found out that stud length is 92 and 5/8 of an inch. Okay. Now, why would stud length be 92 and 5/8 when an 8 foot sheet of plywood is 96 inches? 96 inches equals 8 feet. Okay. If you don't believe me, you can go to your calculator and do 12 inches times 8. Okay. And you'll come up with 96 inches. So 12 inches times 8 feet, is 96 inches. And so 96 inches is more than the 92 and 5/8 stud length. But when you take the thickness of the bottom plate, which is 1.5 inches, because the edge, this is a standard 2x4, okay? And when you lay it flat, okay, sitting on the ground, let's say the ground is here and the wall goes this way, the edge of it is 1.5 inches in actual thickness. So if this is 1.5 inches and the top plate is 1.5 inches, well, 1.5 inches plus 1.5 inches is 3, right? Plus the double top plate is another 1.5 inches. So if you take another 1.5, that's 4.5. So we have 4.5 inches. And if we add that to the stud length, what do we get? So if we take 92 plus 4, well, 4 and 2 is 6. So that's 96. Okay. Plus 1/2 inch and 5/8. Well, 5/8 is 1/8 greater than 1/2. So we take the 2 halves, that makes a whole number. So we can add that to the 96, that makes 97. And with the leftover 1/8, we have 97 and 1/8 of an inch. Okay, now that is bigger than the 8-foot sheet that we need to be able to vertically hang in here on this wall. So on this wall, let's grab a different color for a second. We want to be able to, let's say, put a 4x8 sheet of plywood right here, halfway splitting the stud, or let's say a piece of drywall. Usually it's drywall, right? So this is all going to be one sheet of material. If this was 4 feet and this is 8 feet, well, we have a gap then left over because we just said that the whole height of this is 97 and 1/8. Why do we have the gap? Well, the ceiling, if you look up right now in your room, wherever you're sitting, you probably have drywall above you. You have a solid ceiling. You don't have wooden exposed beams, most likely. That's how most places are. That material is usually going to be a 1/2 inch or 5/8 thick, depending on your city's fire code. Let's assume that it's 5/8 thick, okay? So let's come back in here and put in a piece on the ceiling, a piece of 5/8 thick drywall up there first. So you put the drywall up against the ceiling first, then you put the piece of plywood up against that tight, or the drywall up against the ceiling drywall. So that's 8 feet plus 5/8 of an inch. Well, so that would be 96 and 5/8. So then you're really not left with a whole bunch. What's 97 and 1/8 minus 96 and 5/8? That's a 1/2 inch or so, right? So that's going to leave us a 1/2 inch gap along the bottom here to push this material up tight with a drywall kicker. And when we have carpet or things like that, we can tuck the carpet down in underneath that crack. So that's this typical process. That little 1/2 inch is enough that if the floor is uneven or something else is going on too, it gives us a little variation room. So that's something you just need to understand about studs. So when we're drawing, let's take a look at one other quick thing. Now, in order for us to draw this blueprint, we're going to draw to scale. Our scale, which we looked at earlier, you guys should have already drawn this, was 1/8 of an inch equals 1 inch, which means if you're not familiar with the decimal points, you can take your calculator out and just make yourself a quick little chart like this that says 1/8 equals 0.125. You can say 5/8 just by dividing 5 divided by 8 equals 0.625. And then I don't know if you guys can see this. It might be a little fuzzy. Let me see if I can lower the camera. I just noticed that this is kind of fuzzy. Maybe this helps a little bit. 9/16 is 0.5625. So you'll see why we need those in a second. If you get out a calculator, you can use your smartphone or your cell phone or whatever to do this. We need to convert the scale that we have to a stud length. And we just said a minute ago, you guys hopefully Googled it, that a stud length was 92 and 5/8 long. So we need to know how long that is on our drawing so we can draw it the right size. Well, if 1/8 equals 1 inch here, the way that we would get 1 inch would be to take 1/8, in this case it's 0.125 on our calculator. So if I take out my calculator and I turn it on, clear it out, 0.125, okay, and I say that equals to 1 inch. If I had 3 inches, or if I had, let's just, 0.125, if I want that to equal 1 inch, then you would times that by 1. But as you guys always know, 1 times anything is the same thing. So, right, that's the proof, though, that that equals 1 inch. So now we want the 0.125 times this, 92.58. Well, in order to do 5/8, we need to have this 0.625. 92.625. Okay? So we basically said 1/8 of an inch times this amount is Oh, no, I didn't actually times it. Times 0.125. There we go. So that is in our drawing size. It's 11 inches, 0.578. Now, 0.578 is kind of a weird decimal if you're trying to figure out how many tick marks on your ruler this is. We know that from our calculation we did a little earlier that a half of an inch would be 0.5. Everybody knows that 0.5 is 1/2, right? But so this is bigger than a half because it's 0.578. The next thing up on the ruler would be 0.5625. Well, this is actually slightly bigger than 9/16, but if we said it was 5/8, which would be the next size up over that, that's 0.625. That's too big. So it's somewhere between 5/8 and 9/16. For the sake of our drawing, we're just going to say it's 9/16. It'll be close enough. But that'll get us in the ballpark. So we're going to draw our studs to this length. From top to bottom, the studs are going to be 11 and 5/625, or 9/16, 11 and 9/16 in height. Let me move this stuff out of the way so we can start drawing. Okay, so that's from the top of the stud to the bottom. You guys can see that on this picture at the bottom of the stud. Let me put the camera back up tall so you can see the full drawing as we kind of keep moving forward now. Okay, so to start drawing this wall, the first thing we need to do is we're going to need to figure out where the wall goes. Oh, hopefully that focuses. Okay, so in order to figure that out, what I want you to do is I want you to draw from the bottom of your paper up 1 inch. I want you to leave a 1 inch space. You can see I already kind of did that. I use the thickness of my ruler because my ruler is 1 inch. If your ruler is not 1 inch and you don't have another ruler to measure your ruler, don't use your ruler. Only if you know it's 1 inch. And I know mine is 1 inch. So you might have to actually take your ruler and draw a tick mark that's an inch up. Come over here, draw a tick mark that's an inch up, and then connect the dots. I also found the center point of my paper. And the way that I did that is I guessed what I thought the center was. And I came over here, and my guess was that the center was about 11 and a half. So I marked 11 and a half, and then I came over to here, and I'm talking about the center of the paper from the drafting line right here. Right here. We don't want to use the center of the paper from the edge over here. It's the center of the drawing area, okay, what's left, the blank area. And then I went from the edge over here, I came in about 11 and a half, and I put a tick mark. I know it's hard for you guys to see this on the camera, but I have 2 tick marks that are not perfectly touching. There's about a little more than a 1/16 of an inch gap left over here. So I have to pick whether I want to change the measurement or just kind of shift the whole drawing to one side or the other. And that's what I did. So I'm going to just shift it to the right a little bit, leaving a little bit more on the left, because remember, the left is where your papers on a big blueprint would get attached. So I'm going to shift everything this way, 16th. So in order to do that, from this line, we're going to say 11 and a half is my center line. We're going to come up here, 11 and a half. Let's make sure my ruler is accurate. Is the center line. And then from the very, very center of this paper, I'm going to put a very light line. Okay? In drafting, if you put a C directly over a line, that means that it is the center line of whatever it is you're drawing or creating. Let's see if I can get that to focus. This camera is not as great as I was hoping. Center line, okay? So there's your C. So now what I did is I just went from the center line along that 1 inch line up. I took my ruler and I drew 6 inches to the right of it and 6 inches to the left of it, and I drew it a little bit harder because this light line here and here, we're going to erase that later. So we made it very light. This line here is the bottom of our stud or our walls. That's going to keep. So we're drawing that one a little bit harder. Now from here, we need to start drawing just as we've been drawing in our practice blueprints. 3/16. This is going to be the thickness of a stud. And the reason that I know that it's 3/16, again, if we do this math, and you say the 1/8 times 1/2, or 1.5, you're going to get 3/16, okay? So you can do the math and confirm it, but that's where we're at. I need to connect these two dots together. I need to have 2 fingers on this ruler so that it doesn't move. Now I have my bottom plate. My bottom plate is 12 inches long. It was 6 this way and 6 that way from center. That's a full 12 inches long. And now I need to draw my 92 1/4 inch stud in here to scale. And we said that was going to be 11 9/16. So I'm going to come vertically up with a line. In order to do that, I need to have a second tick mark. Let's just put a tick mark at 5.5 here. So then I can use that against the edge of my wall. So this wall edge here is the 1 tick mark, and the tick mark up here is the other tick mark. And I put my ruler right on the top of the bottom plate at 11 9/16, so I can go from 0 all the way down to that point. And that's the height of my stud. Okay, so now we're going to do the same thing. Actually, here, let's make it a full stud. We're going to come over 3/16 top and bottom. Now we got a stud. Okay, now we need to do the same thing over here. We need to draw a stud so that it's perfectly straight. We don't want it veering off at an angle. In order to do that, we're relying on this paper to be a nice square piece of paper. And then I'm going to use this ruler to measure accurately from the edge to the edge of my wall. And I've got 5 9/16. So I need to come up here and put a 5 9/16 mark. And then from that mark and the edge of this wall right here, I'm going to connect the 2 dots to the height that I need to go to, which is 11 9/16, the height of my studs again, or a stud length of 92 5/8, right? So I should be able to, from the top of this stud to the top of this stud, if everything was square, you should have from outside to outside still should have 12 inches. I'm going to draw my line across the top because this line is going to be the bottom of the top plate, which we'll draw in a moment. So I'm going to come over here, 3/16. I'm going to come over from this bottom one, 3/16, because that together represents the 1.5 inch in thickness of each stud. And again, we've got 2 studs. We've got our outside studs defining this wall. Now we need the top plate. We know that we're going to have not only a top plate, but a double top plate. I'm going to line my ruler up with the outside line here. And I'm going to go ahead and draw a tick mark at 3/16 and then 6/16, or 3/8 of an inch up from wherever I'm drawing. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and put both those tick marks in there. I'm going to take a little shortcut and get ahead of myself because that'll speed us up a little bit. And then I also will put in the line on the outside there. Let's go ahead and draw this line over from that tick mark to this one. See, if I'm holding with my thumb, that's 1 point. It's easy to push the ruler with 1 point. You really need to hold it with 2 points of contact. So I'm going to shift this paper over this way. Show you what I mean. So I'm going to hold now the ruler with 2 points of contact, my thumb and my finger. Now it's a lot harder to push the ruler, right? It's much more stable this way. You're going to get a much more accurate result holding down with 2 fingers. And I'll pull my pencil along that top plate and then along that double top plate. And then we're going to need this line right here. Okay, so check it out. We've got a wall starting to take shape. We got our center line, we got our bottom plate, we got our top plate, we got our double top plate, and we got 2 full-length studs. Now we need everything that goes in between. Well, as we've discussed before, if you take a look at any tape measure, any American tape measure, you'll see that about every 16 inches is a red mark, right? And that's because every 16 inches is how far we space apart studs in a typical wall, and it makes it easy to read the tape measure. So we need to space them out every 16 inches. What would be the equivalent of 16 inches in real life? In order to do that, we'll come back to the calculator real quick, because some of you guys may prefer a calculator instead of doing the math in your head. We need the 1/8 again. If you don't remember what 1/8 is, you can divide 1 divided by 8. It's 0.125. Now we're going to take that 0.125 and we're going to times that by times that 0.125 times what would be 16 inches. And that's going to give us 2. So that means that in our drawing, every 2 inches will represent what 16 inches is in real life. Okay? So we're going to put a stud from this right side every 2 inches going over. So I'm going to use the ruler kind of reading it backwards. So from the right side of my stud here, we're going to go to 10. I'm going from the 12 to the 10, that's 2 inches, and then over 3/16. Then I'm going to go down 2 more inches to 8 and 3/16. Then I'm going to go down to 2 more inches, which is that 6 mark, and 3/16, that's the center. Then we're going to go to 4 and 3/16. Then we're at the 2, 3/16 from there, and then you're all the way down at the end. So the last little section here is going to be a little bit narrower by 1.5 inches than all the rest. And that's fine. That's usually how it ends up working out. So now we need to do the same thing at the top, but I'm going to flip my ruler around, so we're going to read it the other way. I'm just doing this so that I can see it with you guys here at the camera. So from the outside of the stud here, we're going to cover 2 inches. And then from the 2-inch mark over 3/16 for the thickness of the stud. Then 2 to 4, and then 3/16. And from 4 to 6, plus our 3/16. Then we're going to go to 8, and our 3/16. Then we're going to go to 10, and then mark 3/16 beyond that. So now we have a bunch of double marks here and down here at the bottom, where we can start drawing all of our studs. Keep in mind we're going to put in a door and a window in here, so you're going to want to make these lines a little bit light, and you can always go back and trace them again later to make them darker where they need to be. So I'm going to come in here and start drawing so light, knowing that I will erase some of them. I'm going to skip this one here. I suggest you guys do that too. It'll keep your paper a little cleaner. We're putting in a header here for sure. Okay. This center line is going to get filled in. It will no longer be our center line as much as it will be our stud. Now please pay attention to the fact that I am not drawing my lines over the bottom plate or into the top plate. They are between the top and the bottom plate. That way I do not have to erase inside that area. Right? I'm keeping the plates themselves clean. So this C now has to go. It's no longer useful for us as a center mark. And what we need to do is start drawing our headers. So the headers for the doorway and the window, you can see this is the stud that I told us not to draw right here. And the reason is because we'd have to erase all of this. And so I'm saving you some erasing and nasty marks. This is just going to come down for the sake of our drawing. Whatever the remainder is, we want to, in a typical wall, you're going to have a doorway that is 82 inches. Okay. Let's Google it real quick. Don't take my word for it. Let's check the internet. Okay, Google, what is the standard door height? Standard door height. Let's see. 80 inches. And standard interior door is 80 inches tall. So 80 inches is what we're going for. We want to have 80 inches from the top of this bottom plate to the top of this plate here. And what that will allow us to do is when you're actually building a house, after the walls are all set, is they'll cut out this part of the plate and you'll end up getting an extra 1.5 inches. But then that space ends up being used for the frame up here. So you'll still end up with the right size for your door. So we need to figure out what the equivalent of 80 inches would be from here to the bottom of this header. Back to the calculator. So hopefully you guys figured out how to do this by now. We're going to take the 0.125 or 1/8 of an inch, okay, and we're going to times that by 80 inches, and that says 10 inches. So that means we need to be 10 inches from the top of the bottom plate to the bottom of this header. So what I ended up doing, because I don't want this doorway to be too narrow, is we ended up using, this is actually one of our original studs, and so is this one here. We're going to add a king stud to the outside of either of these studs. So if we break these studs here by putting the header in them, we'll add a king stud on either side of the outsides. That'll leave us a decent width in doorway. So I'm going to start by, to put in the header, I'm going to actually start by putting in my king studs. 3/16 over to the right, and 3/16 from the left one. Okay, so now I have my double set up here so that I have my jack studs or tremors on the inside and my king studs on the outside. And I'm going to come up 10 inches, which is what we just calculated, to the bottom of that header. I'm going to come up 10 inches to the bottom of this one here. And then this line is actually going to break the jack stud. So it's going to be drawn through that interior stud. Okay, so I will need to erase a little bit of this line inside here once we figure out where the top of that goes. So the question then I have for you guys is, I'm wondering if you can tell me, if I have a 4x6 material, which is actually 5.5 inches tall in real life, this would be 5.5 inches tall. How big are we actually drawing it? Let's see if you can figure it out before I figure it out. 0.125 times 5.5 equals 0.6875. So 0.6875 would be the height of our material, which, let's see, I'm not sure if that's 7/8 or not. Let me figure this out by checking with a calculator. So if I go 7 divided by 8, that would be 0.875. So that's definitely less than that. 5/8 is 0.625, so that's more than 5/8. What's in between 5/8 and 7/8? Maybe it's 6/8 or 3/4 of an inch. So that would be 0.75, And so that's definitely less than 3/4. So what's between 3/4 and 5/8? That would be 11/16. Let's check that one. 11 divided by 16.6875. Oh, nailed it. So that would be what we're going for. It's going to be the 11/16. So we're going to draw 11/16 up from this edge. That's a half of an inch is 8/16. 5/8 is 10/16. So one tick past 10/16 is 11. So if I take those two, I'm going to actually use my ruler to erase the rest of that inner line and to draw the top of the plate. Okay, we got it nice and clean. So now that we have this top plate, we can now go ahead and put in the little cripple here down the middle. So I'm going to come back in and measure from the center line here my 2 inches, my 3/16, and then we can draw this in here where it needs to be. All right, so we got a wall with a door. Now we just need a window, and we're all done with this particular video. Let's just draw this real quick. I'm going to show you guys a couple tricks to speed this up. I'm going to use my ruler and just line it up with this plate over here. We're going to draw this one in pretty quick. Actually, let me just double check the measurement before we do that. So we got 2 inches. 8, 10. So we're adding. This is original, and this is original. So we ended up adding a cripple to the inside of the window on either side. Not a cripple, sorry, a jack stud to the inside. So what I'm going to do, let's just line up this header alignment here. It should be the exact same thing. So now we got a header that lines up all the way across, which is what you want all your windows and doors to be at the same height. Otherwise they look funny. And we want a 3-foot window. So I'm going to go ahead and put the sill plate in before we draw the jack studs. It's going to be fast that way. In order to get 3 feet, 3 feet is 36 inches. So if we come over here and we say 0.125 times 36 inches is 4.5 inches on paper. So we're going to come over here and say 4.5 right there. And 4.5 is right here. Plus we need to come down after that. Our 3/16. Okay, so we got the header in, we got the bottom plate in. Let's come 3/16 inward from both of the studs. I'm going to do a top and bottom mark, and then I can draw my vertical lines without drawing through my plates. So I'll skip the header, and I will skip the sill plate. And by doing it this way, I have a lot less erasing if I do it in this order. Okay, so we got a door, we got a window, we got a wall. Check it out. Cool. If you guys have any questions on how to complete the wall, or if there's some measurements that I left out that you're not sure of, please let me know. Otherwise, stay tuned for the next video.